Good morning, everybody. Happy Vlogmas Day 1. It's 9:30 in the morning. I slept a little bit late. Doesn't matter. I am wearing multiple festive patterns in a single outfit that looks kind of like pajamas. It's not pajamas. I don't care. I'm very excited for it to be December 1st. I'm excited for Vlogmas to start. I'm excited to open my advent calendars. I'm excited to drink my Christmas teas. I am excited to read Christmas Mystery. I'm excited to get festive. I am so ready for Vlogmas. everybody. Well, we've reached pretty much the end of this video, or it's only 8 p.m. I'm not exactly going to go to bed right now, but we've reached kind of the end of what I am probably going to consider filming worthy content for the day. It's just time to kind of relax, watch some more Vlogmas videos, do a little bit of reading. But that also means that it's time for the segment in the title of this video, which is My December TBR. Originally, my plan for my December TBR was to go back through all of my TBR videos throughout the year and read all the books that I said I was going to read, but I haven't read yet. Then I kind of thought to myself, okay, well, I should narrow this down, because while there are plenty of books I haven't read yet, some of them are books I own and some of them are library books, and I really didn't want to do the library books for my December TBR because I'd have to put them all on hold again, and I really would have no control over how quickly they came in, and it felt like it would be too much pressure to try to get all the library books in place for the December TBR and then read them before they were due back. I felt like that would just really take up a lot of my time. Unfortunately, most of the books that I said I would get around to over the year in my other TBR videos but didn't end up reading are library books, and I'm guessing that the reason I didn't read most of those is because they ended up being due back at the library before I had time to read them. So I ended up with more of a kind of smaller number. I only had 2, I think, books that I own from my TBR list that I didn't get around to reading. So I'm definitely going to read those 2 books. But then I decided to kind of use December, in terms of the books that I own, to do some rereads of books that I've loved over the years, and also to kind of patch some important holes, I feel like, in my reading that I really want to get around to but maybe haven't gotten around to yet. Now, there's no particular order to how I am discussing these books with you. It's just kind of how I ended up stacking them, which means that the first book that I want to describe is the book at the top of the pile, which is actually a last-minute addition that I made to this TBR. I already had plenty of books on my TBR, probably more books than I'm going to be able to read in the month of December. But then I added an extra one. And the reason was that I was watching a Carolyn Marie Reads video. I really love her. She's a great YouTuber. I was watching one of her most recent videos about the books that she was reading, and she mentioned that she was reading Neverwhere by Neil Gaiman. And my husband was sitting there watching the video with me, and when she mentioned that, he said, "Oh, I love Neverwhere. It's one of my favorite books." And that was when I realized that Noah is my husband, and we've been married for almost 10 years, and we've been together for almost 13 years, and I've never read some of his favorite books. Kind of like when I was saying earlier this year that I was reading one of Sarah's favorite books, and I thought it was kind of weird that, being her sister, I'd never read some of her favorite books. I felt the same way about Noah, and I was like, you know what? Let me go ahead and read Neverwhere for my December TBR. And so I had him kind of track down his lovely, as you can see, very dog-eared copy of Neverwhere. And this is one of the books that I'm going to read in December 2022. The next 2 books on my TBR stack are both books that I want to revisit, that I haven't read in a long time. And both of them are books that I read in high school, basically just by borrowing them from my dad. I grew up in a very literary family. My parents loved to read, and both of my parents, but I think my dad probably takes up the most of it, have bookshelves scattered all around the house and books everywhere, and I have always been interested in the books that were on my parents' shelves. And so when I was in high school, I used to just take books off the shelves and read them just to see if I could patch up some gaps in my reading. And these 2 books were both books that I really loved when I was in high school. And the first one is The Bean Trees by Barbara Kingsolver. I love this book. I remember reading it when I was in high school. It was the first Barbara Kingsolver that I ever read, and I remember just being so charmed by this book. So here's the jacket copy. It just says, "Clear-eyed and spirited, Taylor Greer grew up poor in rural Kentucky with the goals of avoiding pregnancy and getting away. But when she heads west with high hopes and a barely functional car, she meets the human condition head-on. By the time Taylor arrives in Tucson, Arizona, she has acquired a completely unexpected child, a 3-year-old American Indian girl named Turtle, and must somehow come to terms with both motherhood and the necessity of putting down roots. I just thought this was a charming story. I really loved it, and I'm so excited to just read it again and see if I feel the same way. I've now ended up reading most of the books that Barbara Kingsolver has written and loved them, so I'm optimistic that this one will also stand the test of time, even though it was the first one I read and I didn't know anything about her at that point. And then the second book, this was the book that kind of like changed how I view reading when I was in high school. And a lot of people that I've talked to in my family had the same experience with this book. And this is A Prayer for Owen Meany by John Irving. And when I describe this to people, I say, when I read this book, I just didn't know that a reading experience could be what this is. And I've had this experience now many other times reading books, but this was the first time that I'd ever had that reading experience where you get to the end of a book and you're on such a journey and you're feeling like every possible emotion at one time. You're crying, you're just like flabbergasted, you just don't even know what to think. And when I talk about this with my family, they all say the same thing, which is that this book plants so many threads throughout all of the, like, however, 600 some pages in this book, plants so many threads. And at the end, like in the final chapters, just watching all of the threads come together in a way that I personally had never experienced and could not have possibly imagined. It was just such a transformative reading experience for me, and I really would love to revisit this. I don't even know if I want to describe what it's about. I might just say, I'm not even going to try. I might just say, just go read this book. And I hope that I feel the same way about it. I know that, like, all my family members who I've talked to, even decades later after reading the book, do feel the same way about it. So I really hope that I feel the same way about it. I'm just so excited to dive back into this book and feel all the feelings all over again. The next book that I have on my list is something that I've been looking forward to reading for a very long time. As you know now, if you've watched even one of my TBR videos, I'm pretty sure it's come up numerous times in just the TBR videos that I've made this year. But if you know me at all, you know that both Noah and I are huge J.R.R. Tolkien fans. And my favorite book by Tolkien is The Silmarillion. I just was really taken by the story of The Silmarillion, and I love all the books, but that one I just ended up loving more than the rest of them. But there's always been a hole in my reading, and that is I have never read Unfinished Tales. And I think that now is finally the time for me to go ahead and read this book. It spans across the timelines of all of the Lord of the Rings books, as far as I'm aware, all of the Tolkien novels, Silmarillion, and all the Lord of the Rings books. And so it has a very broad timeline, but it really kind of goes more into what I would consider to be the nerdy stuff. Like, the reason I love the Silmarillion was because it had all the nerdy stuff in it. And so I think that this is a great companion to if you really love kind of the nerdy stuff about J.R.R. Tolkien's novels. I also just really love this edition. So it's got this beautiful art right here, and then I'm trying to make it so you can see. There you go. If you look at the top there, you can see the light going across it that has this like kind of like inlaid texture of the characters at the top, and I really think that is amazing. So this is another hefty book. I mean, there's notes at the end, so it depends on like how much of the footnotes how much time you spend on those, but it's another like 600 plus page book. This is why I say I'm probably not going to finish all of these books, but I think even starting any of these is an amazing way to round off the year. Next book that I'm reading is a book that has been on my shelf for a while and I've just never gotten around to it. It's one of maybe 3 or 4 nonfiction books that I picked up on my very first visit to a beloved bookstore in Maryland that I've gone to now many times, called Second Story. And the first time I went there, I ended up kind of just like going through all the nonfiction sections, and I ended up picking a lot of mostly nonfiction books, and this was one of them. It's called The Singular Pilgrim, Travels on Sacred Ground. And it is kind of a memoir / general nonfiction book about this woman who ends up going to a whole bunch of she experiences a bunch of spiritual pilgrimages for herself. I believe they're mostly Christian based. Most of the ones that are described are Christian based, but I believe it does span multiple religions. And so I just thought this was a really interesting book, an interesting profile of someone who goes and tries to understand why people make these kind of extraordinary and sometimes slightly perilous, religious journeys, and what they gain from having those experiences. How does it maybe deepen their concept of their faith, and why do people do the things that they do? And that's always been kind of my essential question, is why do people do the things that they do? Why do people do increasingly strange or risky or vulnerable things? What makes people do those things? And so this book will be a really interesting way to kind of delve into that type of material. And again, this book is over 400 pages. We're really just going for it. We're really just going for it in December. What can I tell you? Here's another book that you've already heard me talk about. This is one of the 2 books that still remains on my books that I own TBR of what I collated from all of my TBRs this year that I have not yet gotten to. And that is, some of you may remember if you've seen my other TBR videos, that I was very excited to read Laini Taylor's Strange the Dreamer. And then I never got around to it. It just never happened. I even had it set aside on my bookshelf on a pile of books I really need to get around to reading. And by the end of the year, it was practically the only book still sitting there, and I still hadn't picked it up. So I'm very interested to actually pick this up in December. The plot sounds so interesting. It's another hefty one. It's over 500 pages. We're just really going for it, like I said. But it seems like a kind of a thrilling story, and it sounds like there's a lot of interesting questions that need to be answered. As you know, famously, Laszlo Strange, war orphan and junior librarian. Pretty epic description of someone, the 2 qualities that you can choose to describe somebody. I love it. And I would like to finally get to this. I would like this to be the month that I finally get to this book. So this next book is kind of an out of left field choice. And so first I want to explain to you how I came to own this book. And the culprit, once again, is Second Story Books in Maryland. They did a really interesting thing during the quarantine times. I may have told you about this in another video, but they did a really interesting thing in quarantine times where you could send in a request for the types of books that you liked. And they would send you, you would pay a certain amount of money, and they would send you a book bundle with books that they tracked down through their stacks. It's a used bookstore, so the books that they just kind of tracked down through their stacks that they thought fit the bill of what you might enjoy based on the categories that you described. And I thought, wow, this is the most amazing idea. I'm going to do it. And I sent them in just a list of things that I enjoy, and they sent me a lot of books, a whole bunch of books for the price that I got them for. And I think one of the things that I said was that I liked vintagey stuff, vintage movie stars and things like that, because I do really enjoy that kind of stuff. And so this is the book that came out of it, and it's called My Blue Notebooks, and it's a diary, and it's a diary of this woman, and she's a French woman, and she was a dancer in the I don't know how to pronounce it in French, so I'm not even gonna try. But she's a famous dancer, and she was apparently once known as Paris's most beautiful and notorious courtesan. And this is like a spicy memoir about what she did in her life and all of her escapades in her life. And she had, it sounds like, just based on the little that you see here, a very interesting, chaotic life. Almost like too wild to be believed. And so I'm excited to kind of read it and see. I honestly don't know what to expect, but it seems like here it is a spicy, she does describe her spicy encounters. So I'm very interested to see what that might entail. I think this is going to be a fun ride, regardless of what exactly even ends up being in the book. I think it's going to be a fun ride. Next on my list is another book that's kind of hard to describe. I'm not sure exactly how I came about owning this book. I thought maybe it was Second Story again, but I don't see anywhere in the first pages of the book like a little price written in pencil on it, which usually means I got it from a used bookstore. So I am really not sure where I got this book from, how it came into my hands, which I guess is kind of the mystery factor of that is kind of appropriate for this book. This book is a nonfiction book called Empty Mansions, and it says here, The Mysterious Life of Huguette Clark and the Spending of a Great American Fortune. And it sounds like it kind of spans between, like, the Gilded Age, like, ostentatious wealth type of situation, and then the present day. It sounds like there's someone who finds this house that's been unoccupied, and then they're selling off all of this, like, rich woman's valuables after she dies, and she's very mysterious, like, she hasn't appeared in decades, and it's unclear, like, what's happening with this inheritance, what happened to this wealth, and it just ends up being a really mysterious story about, like, who was this woman, and how did her wealth and her valuables kind of end up like this. And so I'm excited to read it. I always say I'm excited to read it, but I'm excited to read all of these. I love that I don't know how I came about this book, and I think the mystery will really just take me on a ride, and it's another big book. We've gotten over 400 pager here, but a lot of that is footnotes and citations, so maybe it won't be as long as it feels. Okay, so the final stretch. The last book on my list is another book that I said I would read in a previous TBR video and then never gotten around to, and that is A Chef's Tale. This is the one I described in a previous video. It's a memoir about a chef. It has the recipes in the book. It has, like, nice little illustrations. It's got everything going on, and I love reading about the food world, reading books about people's lives. I enjoy memoirs generally, so that is another book that I am hoping to get to in the month of December. I think Strange the Dreamer and A Chef's Tale are my top two picks, not because they're the ones I'm most excited about, although I am, as I said before, excited about all of them, but because if I'm keeping my promises to YouTube, these are the two books I have to read by the end of the year in order to fulfill that, and everything else is just extra books that I really want to read. So if we're prioritizing in any certain way, I guess that would be the way. So we'll say that those are my top two, and then everything else is kind of falling in a pile from there. So that's it, everybody. I hope that you all enjoyed the first day of Vlogmas. I hope you're finding some good Vlogmas videos to watch. At the beginning of the day today, I felt like there weren't that many Vlogmas videos, and now suddenly there are more Vlogmas videos than I can possibly watch right now, so I'm going to have to be pretty choosy about which ones I maybe watch tonight or what I decide to do tonight. But tomorrow we will have Sarah filming, and we will see you all in the next one. Happy Vlogmas!